am your host, Nero Wolfe, and from storm and silence comes a new mystery for us to examine.
Chapter 1. Faye the Friendly Borrowing on West 35th Street, where Nero Wolfe conducted his campaigns against disorder from a brownstone arranged to suit both his genius and his comfort. There are rules for nearly everything. Beer is brought at certain hours. Orchids are attended at certain hours. Clients are received, if at all, according to regulations as rigid as military code and more intelligently framed. There is also, though not written down, a rule that murder shall not intrude before lunch unless it comes with unusually strong credentials. That Wednesday it arrived at 10 minutes past 11, wearing a cheap blue suit and a face that looked as if anxiety had been chewing it all night. I was in the office, at my desk, opening mail and deciding which part of it deserved an answer, which part deserved contempt, and which part belonged in the wastebasket without debate. Wolfe had finished his breakfast and gone upstairs to the plant rooms at 10, where for 2 hours each morning he gave himself to the orchids with a devotion he denied to most of mankind. Fritz was somewhere in the back arranging miracles for lunch. The house was calm, orderly, and as nearly perfect as anything gets in New York. Then the bell rang. I went to the hall, opened the front door, and found the blue suit on the stoop. He was young, perhaps 27, with sandy hair that needed cutting and hands that had no place to go except into and out of his pockets. He had the look of a man who had lately discovered that breathing, though necessary, was not always sufficient. "Yes," I said. "Mr. Wolfe?" he asked. "I have got to see Mr. Wolfe." "People often feel that way. State your business." "My name is Martin Hale. It is urgent," he said. Urgent as if he had paid cash for the word and meant to get full use of it. "Come in." He entered, glanced around the hall as though expecting police to spring from the hat rack, and followed me to the office. I pointed him to the red leather chair across from Wolfe's desk, but he didn't sit until I took my own chair and let him see that no trapdoor was opening under him. "Mr. Wolfe is upstairs," I told him. "Unless the building is on fire or the city has declared a holiday in his honor. He won't be down before 11. You can tell me." He swallowed. "I would rather tell him." "Would you?" "Most people would rather tell me I am younger and better looking." He managed no smile. "It's about a man who was killed yesterday. That moved it from routine misery to business. Go on. In my town, just outside the city, a place called Riddle Street, though it is hardly a street, more a row of houses and 2 shops and a narrow lane pretending to be important." He was speaking quickly now, as if he feared courage might evaporate if not used. The dead man was Ezra Vane. He had an office in his house, at the back, where he did accounts and deeds and other papers for half the district. Yesterday evening he was found in his study with his skull broken. With what? They say a bronze horse from his desk. They, the police. All right, continue. The room was locked. From the inside. He nodded. That is what they say. The windows were latched. There was no one there except... He stopped. "Except the person the police like." "Yes." His hands came out of his pockets, opened, shut again. "Me." That had shape now. "Why?" "Because Miss Clara Vane, his sister, told everyone she had lent me the spare key to Mr. Vane's office. She says I asked for it so I could leave a parcel inside. I did ask for it. I did borrow it." He leaned forward. "But I did not kill him. I gave him the stare that means I am listening, but have not yet decided whether I will enjoy it. You borrowed a key to a murdered man's locked study on the day he was killed. That's not elegant. I know it. Did you leave a parcel?" "Yes." "What parcel?" "A wrapped ledger from Hibbard's store. Mr. Vane had asked to see it. I keep books there part-time." "Did you see Ezra Vane alive?" "Number Miss Vane said he was out, and I could put the parcel on his desk." "You did?" "Yes. And then I left. That is all. It rarely is all, but I let it pass. Why come to Nero Wolfe?" He looked at me with an expression half desperate appeal, half honest bewilderment. "Because by morning everyone had decided I was guilty. Not only the police, the town. I was poor. I was nervous. I had borrowed the key. It fitted too well. A thing that fits too well sometimes is wrong, isn't it? That was a better sentence than I expected from the blue suit. Sometimes, I conceded. And a man at the station, Sergeant Loomis, said if there was some clever explanation I had better find it quick. His mouth tightened. He meant to mock me, but I remembered reading about Mr. Wolf, so I came. Do you have money? A little. Not enough for greatness. That depends on the rate. Wait. I looked at the clock. 6 minutes of orchid time remained. Wolf would object to being brought down early for anything less than invasion, but a locked room murder with a ready-made victim pleased him as a chess problem. Pleases a man who likes to win without moving much. I pressed the button for the plant rooms. The house phone clicked, and Theodore's outraged whisper came thinly. Yes? Tell Wolf a murder has arrived in a blue suit and wants justice before lunch. A pause, then Wolf's voice, muffled by distance and annoyance. Foo, I bring him at 11. He is already here. Another pause, longer and colder. Then keep him there. The line went dead. Martin Hale watched me as if I had been translating divine signals. Will he see me? He will. Sit still and try not to look more guilty than necessary. Wolf came down at 11 on the dot, filling the doorway with 1/6 of a ton of cultivated resistance. He moved to his desk, sat, shifted papers, 1/8 of an inch to restore moral order, and regarded Martin Hale with the yellow-brown eyes that had withered stronger men. This had better be good, he said. I made introductions. Hale started in at once, and to his credit he told it straight. He lived in Riddle Street, had worked odd bookkeeping jobs since his father died, and had from time to time done errands for Ezra Vane, who handled accounts, deeds, wills, and anything else that could be done with paper, ink, and an expression of chilly superiority. Ezra had enemies in the modest way a man can have enemies without ever achieving celebrity. He was exacting, private, and fond of being obeyed. He lived with his sister Clara, a woman in her early 40s whose tongue had acquired local fame. There was also a maid, of all work, Mrs. Kipp, deaf in one ear and suspicious in both. Yesterday, shortly after 4, Hale had gone to the Vane house carrying the ledger parcel. Ezra was out. Clara Vane met him at the door, said her brother had forgotten the appointment, and when Martin explained about the ledger, she handed him the spare key to the study entrance at the side of the hall. He used it, entered the study, put the parcel on Ezra's desk, and came out again. He returned the key to Clara and left. At 6:30, according to Clara, she went to call her brother for supper, found his study door locked, got no answer, used the same spare key and discovered Ezra Vane dead beside his desk with the bronze horse on the carpet near him. The police, summoned at once, learned of Martin's afternoon visit and found him by 8:30. He had no alibi from 5 to 6 because he had been walking alone by the river road, trying to decide whether poverty was less humiliating than borrowing money from an uncle. By midnight, he had been released, not cleared. By morning, he had become the town's preferred solution. Wolf heard him through without interruption, which meant either he was interested or asleep with his eyes open. Since I know the difference, I can report it was interest. When Hale finished, Wolf put a fingertip against the desk blotter. This is a rural or semi-rural community. Yes, sir. Then why are you here instead of retaining a local attorney? Because an attorney would defend me after I am accused. I want someone to know before then that it is wrong. Wolf grunted. Archie. Questions. I had a few ready. How far is Riddle Street from here? An hour and a half by train and motor, perhaps less. Who inherits Ezra Vane's property? Hale blinked. I don't know, Miss Vane. Perhaps there may be cousins. Any talk of quarrels? Money trouble? Women old grudges? Yes to all, but not enough for certainty. Mr. Vane quarreled with people as another man might take snuff. It was part of him. Did you touch anything in the study besides the parcel? I may have touched the desk with one hand when I put it down. Nothing more. Did you notice the bronze horse then? He frowned, thinking hard. Number? I don't remember seeing it. Was there anything odd about the room? He was silent so long I thought the question had failed. Then, Yes, but I did not think it mattered. It often does. The clock on the mantel had stopped. Wolf's eyes opened a fraction wider. At what time? I did not look carefully. A little after 5, perhaps. The hands were close together. Yet you entered at about 4. Yes, sir. And you noticed it. I notice clocks. My father repaired them. I made a note. Wolf leaned back. What else? Nothing. Hale hesitated. Only this. When I came out of the study and returned the key, Miss Vane seemed surprised that I had come back so quickly. How long were you in the room? A minute, 2 at most. And her surprise was marked. Yes. Wolf closed his eyes. That is never a sign of fatigue. It means the machinery has engaged. I said, describe Clara Vane. A thin woman, straight-backed, grey eyes, brown hair going hard instead of fading. She speaks as if every sentence were a correction. Your relationship with her? None. We know each other by sight. Did Ezra Vane like you? Number he merely found me useful and cheap. That, I said, is a common form of affection. Wolf ignored me. Why, Mr. Hale, did Miss Vane lend you the key instead of taking the parcel herself? I asked to leave it where Mr. Vane would see it. She said that would save trouble. Wolf's lips moved, not quite a smile. Convenience is frequently expensive. He opened his eyes. Mr. Hale, I disliked travel, provincial police, and murder. Unfortunately, murder sometimes compensates by being intellectually insolent. This one may qualify. My fee, Hale flushed. I warned Mr. Goodwin. Will be postponed, Wolf said irritably, if I accept. Archie will go to Riddle Street this afternoon. He will look, listen, and return. If I am bored, you will seek aid elsewhere. If I am not bored, I may proceed. Relief. Hit Hale so hard I thought he might slide off the chair. Thank you. Do not thank me. It is premature. Wolf turned to me. Take his address. Also the names of the police officers, the medical examiner, the household staff, any nearby persons who discovered or observed anything, and all train times. You will lunch early. That last item was aimed at Fritz as much as me, and from the kitchen passage came the faint clang of a saucepan. Perhaps acknowledgement, perhaps protest. I spent the next 20 minutes extracting names and details from Martin Hale. The police were headed by a local chief named Benizzi and a county man, Deputy Corbett. The medical examiner was Dr. Vollard. Neighbors included a retired schoolmaster named Penk, who saw everything and understood none of it, and a widow named Mrs. Antrim, who understood everything after it was explained. There was also mention of a lawyer from town, Louis Dorr, who had called on Ezra that afternoon, but claimed he found no one in. I tucked that away. When Hale had gone, promising to be at his rooming house that evening if needed, Wolf sat with his eyes half shut and his fingertips together. Well, I asked. Well, what? Am I bored? Number, you are expensive. That too. Anything to share before I go earn my train fare? Yes. 3 items. First, a locked room is rarely locked in the way people mean. Second, a woman who lends a key lends testimony as well. One must examine both. Third, the stopped clock may be genuine, accidental, or planted. If planted, it is vulgar. Anything useful. That was useful. For a philosopher. He opened one eye. Archie, Mr. Hale, said Miss Vane was surprised at his prompt return. Why? She expected him to stay longer. Why? I considered it. Because she wanted him in the room at a certain time, because she hoped someone would see him there, because there was something in the room she thought would delay him. Wolf grunted. Good, go find out which. I went to lunch. Fritz, annoyed at the disruption, but loyal to standards, gave me cold sliced beef, potato salad, bread that had no right to be that good, and coffee that might have persuaded a bishop to lie. While I ate, I reviewed the bones of it. Ezra Vane dead in a locked study, Martin Hale in possession of the spare key, Sister Clara obligingly placing that key in his hand, a stopped clock, a witness surprised by speed. It had promise. By 1:15 I was on a train north with a notebook in my pocket, and Martin Hale's uneasiness for company. The city peeled away in layers of brick, warehouse, yard, and then the untidy fringe where people commute because they must and complain because they can. March had put a smear of damp grey over everything. The sky hung low, and the bare trees along the tracks looked as if they had given up on elegance until April. At the little station nearest Riddle Street, Hale met me with a second-hand motor car, whose engine coughed like an old clerk clearing its throat. Before bad news, he drove, talking little. I let him keep silent. Men under strain either need to talk or not. Forcing the wrong choice is amateur work. Riddle Street turned out to be exactly what he had said, a narrow row of respectable houses pretending to individuality, a grocer, a drugstore, and a lane that had once hoped to become a proper road and lost heart. Ezra Vane's house stood 2 doors in from the corner, brick, square, and self-important, with a brass plate by the front door that said Ezra Vane in letters too large for modesty. There, Hale said unnecessarily. A county policeman was posted inside the gate, but a business card with Nero Wolfe's name on it acted like a ceremonial weapon. He let me in after deciding not to be the man who obstructed a celebrity, and Martin remained outside at my suggestion. If the town already wanted him roasted, no point in handing out skewers. Miss Clara Vane received me in the front parlor. She was exactly as advertised, thin, erect, and sharpened by long practice on human shortcomings. Her black dress was plain without being humble. She gave me one look and decided she disapproved of my necktie, profession, and probable ancestry. Mr. Goodwin, from New York? Yes. Sent by Nero Wolfe? Yes. How theatrical. We do what we can. Her nostrils moved a little. If you have come to free Martin Hale with cleverness, you will fail. He had the key. A great many people have had keys and escaped hanging. I am only looking. That is what crows do. Yes, but crows are underrated. Her eyes hardened. I had won nothing, but I had at least prevented her from placing me with the furniture. The study is there, she said, indicating a door across the hall. Chief Benisi has permitted your visit out of misplaced politeness. Has he? I said. Then I shall try not to improve him. The study was at the back, as Hale had said, with one window looking on a narrow yard and a side door leading to the hall. It was a good room for accounts and bad tempers, dark bookcases, a roll-top desk, 2 leather chairs, a mantel with a black marble clock, now standing still at 5:07. The bronze horse rested on a side table, having been restored to dignity after its brief career in violence. There was still a stain on the carpet near the desk, though someone had covered most of it with a chair. I went nowhere near the stain first. I always start with what people want me to ignore. The clock was dusty except where a recent finger had touched its side. I didn't touch it. The desk held orderly stacks of papers, a pen tray, a green shaded lamp, and an empty rectangle in the dust where the parcel might have been placed, and later removed. The window latch was sound. The inside keyhole of the hall door showed use but no force. There was also in the wall beside the bookcase a speaking tube with a brass mouthpiece, a relic for calling the kitchen, probably, and the kind of thing old houses keep after sense has left them. Clara Vane had followed me and stood by the door like a moral judgment. Where was your brother found? I asked. She pointed. There, by the desk, face up, on his side. And you found the door locked? Yes. With this key, she produced it from her pocket, as if she carried evidence for company, a plain brass key, worn bright at the edges. May I? She handed it to me reluctantly. I examined it, then the lock, then the key again. One spare key convenient. Perhaps too convenient. I was starting to develop a prejudice against convenience. When you lent this to Martin Hale, I said, did you watch him use it? Of course not. I am not a nurse. When he returned it, where were you standing? In the hall. Near this door? Yes. You told the police he was in the study around 4:15. About that. And your brother was alive then. She stared at me as if I had insulted grammar. I did not say I saw him alive then. I said he had been alive earlier. Earlier meaning when? At a little before 4, when he came in from the post office and went to his study. That was new. You saw him enter this room at 4? Yes. And afterward, number, and Mr. Dora the lawyer, he called. Her mouth tightened. Who told you that? People talk. He came near 4:30. My brother did not answer, so Mr. Dora left. Did he try the study door? I assume so. Did you hear him? Number, that was possible, though not pretty. I looked again at the clock. 5:07. A planted time is usually chosen for effect, but 5:07 lacked elegance, which made it either true or cleverly ugly. I turned to her. Miss Vane, why were you surprised when Martin Hale came out so quickly? A tiny movement around her eyes. There are times when a quarter inch is louder than a scream. I was not surprised. He says you were. Then he lies in small things as in large ones. Maybe, but if he stayed only a minute, why remember it at all? I remember murder, Mr. Goodwin. It fixes details. That was good enough to be prepared. I filed it. Chief Benizzi arrived before I could try a second pass at her. He was broad, red-faced, and determined not to be impressed by New York. Since he plainly was, the effort made him surly. You've seen enough, he said. This is a local matter. Those are the most enjoyable kind. We have our man. You have a man. He borrowed the key, so I hear. And the dead man was struck sometime between 4 and 6. Was he? I asked mildly. Then you have medical confidence. Dr. Vollard says so. Good, I like confidence as long as it survives questions. His face darkened. Listen, Goodwin, if Wolf thinks he can walk in and make fools of us, he would never walk in, and he never makes fools of people. He merely notices when they have arranged it themselves. That did not improve him. He escorted me out of the study and nearly out of the house, but on the hall table I noticed something that made me pause. A shallow china tray for calling cards and keys, empty except for one bit of twine and a torn scrap of brown wrapping paper. I pointed. From the parcel, Miss Vane said. Probably. My brother, I suppose. That was impossible if the parcel had vanished before he entered the room, or possible if someone wanted it possible, which meant I now had more than one impossible thing, always a promising sign. Outside, I found Martin Hale exactly where I had left him, by the gate, looking as though execution had been scheduled for sunset, and no one had told him whether to dress for it. Well, he asked. I have seen the room, the sister, and the local majesty. I still don't know who killed Ezra Vane. I looked back at the house. The upper windows stared down with the smug vacancy old houses assume when they know more than they plan to tell. But I know this much. Somebody in there is arranging the facts too carefully. That was enough for a beginning, and in Nero Wolfe's business a beginning with one careful arrangement is often the same as a confession waiting for better light. Chapter 2. Fee. The locked study, when I got back to West 35th Street. It was 6:45, damp through at the cuffs, and carrying in my notebook enough contradiction to interest Wolfe for at least one beer. That is saying something. He was in the office where he belonged, installed behind his desk, with the posture of a Byzantine idol and a glass of beer placed exactly where Fritz knew his hand would want it. The yellow lamp by the globe chair was on, making the room look richer than the world outside deserved. He glanced at me once. Well, I handed him my notebook. Ezra Vane's study is still locked. The sister is still acid. The police are still happy, and Martin Hale is still in danger. Also, someone has been tidying the facts. That is not a fact. It is a hope. Report. So I did, while he listened with his eyes half closed and the notebook unopened in front of him, which meant he preferred my phrasing to my handwriting. I told him about the house, the room, the black marble clock stopped at 5:07, the bronze horse back on the side table, the china tray in the hall with the scrap of wrapping paper and bit of twine, Clara Vane's care with her answers, Chief Benizzi's confidence, and the speaking tube by the bookcase. When I described Clara's claim that Ezra had entered the study shortly before 4 and had not been seen afterward, Wolf grunted. When I mentioned her being challenged on her surprise at Hale's quick return, he opened his eyes. And the key? She had it in her pocket when I asked. Plain brass, worn, no frills. One spare to the study door, according to her. According to her, Wolf repeated. And the principal official idiot. Not an idiot. Merely content. He says Dr. Vollard puts the time of death between 4 and 6, with no precision that would inconvenience anybody. Martin borrowed the key. Martin had no alibi for an hour. Martin is nervous and poor. The county can almost hear the jury agreeing already. Wolf took up the notebook then and turned pages with the care a collector gives to dubious antiques. Where is Inspector Bell in this? That is the county man from the station house, I learned on the train back. Bell comes in tomorrow morning. Benizzi was basking until then. Wolf nodded. And Mr. Hale? At his rooming house, trying not to look like Destiny's errand boy. Wolf reached for the beer. The study lamp was burning when the body was found. Yes, the papers undisturbed. As far as anyone says, and as far as I could see. Desk orderly, no drawer pulled, no sign of rummaging. If there was theft, it had excellent manners. No missing silver. Only, if Ezra kept silver in his study, which seems unlikely even in the provinces. Wolf ignored that. And the window. Bolted from inside. The room wanted very badly to be impossible. He drank, set the glass down, and touched the notebook. Archie, the key is not merely a tool, it is a statement. Whenever someone is handed a key in a murder case, the giver is composing prose. That must make Clara Vane a novelist. Do not be frivolous. A key trail leading neatly to one person is inherently indecent. I agree Bell likes his cases tied with string, and this one seems to have tied itself. String, Wolf muttered, and his eyes moved to the notebook again. What kind of string? I blinked. Twine rather on the hall table, with the torn brown paper, probably from the ledger parcel Martin brought. Probably. He leaned back. But if Mr. Vane entered his study shortly before 4, as his sister says, and Mr. Hale placed the parcel on the desk, after that, why should remnants of the wrapping be on the hall table rather than in the study? Because Ezra opened it later and carried the mess out. Why? Because he liked neatness? Bepfoi. A man who does accounts, amid order, does not pause, after being bludgeoned to improve the hall. His eyes sharpened. Either the parcel was opened elsewhere, or someone moved its wrappings. In either event, Miss Vane's narrative acquires a limp. That pleased me. I had been nursing the same limp on the train home. There is more, she said. Dora, the lawyer, called at 4:30 and got no answer. If Ezra was in the study at 4, and Martin was there at 4:15, then by 4:30 either Ezra was dead, unconscious, absent, or refusing Dora. Did Dora leave a statement? Not to me, tomorrow. Wolf shut the notebook. Good, you will return in the morning. See the doctor, Bell, Dor, the maid, and any neighboring eyes. If possible, inspect the lock, also the key ring. The key ring, yes. The user-supplied title for this chapter of our inquiry. His lip moved, a brass key ring. I looked at him. I mentioned a key, not a ring. He looked back. Yet you are thinking of one. That annoyed me because he was right. When Clara Vane had handed me the spare key, it had been on a small brass ring with another object missing from it. The split metal spread slightly, as if something had recently been removed. I had noticed, and not promoted it from nuisance to clue. I saw it, I admitted, a plain ring empty except for the study key. It looked as if another key had once been there. And I didn't ask. Wolf made a sound deep in his throat, one of his private signals of disgust, reserved for my avoidable omissions. Then ask tomorrow. Gladly anything else while you are distributing merit. Yes, if Inspector Bell likes his cases tied with string, cut the string quietly. The bell rang. I went to the hall, expecting perhaps Saul Panzer or a messenger, and found instead a broad man with a square jaw, a hat too small for his head, and the expression of one who disapproved of cities on principle. He gave me a card. Inspector Alonzo Bell, County Investigations. I came down from Riddle Street, he said, to see Nero Wolfe. Did you? That was ambitious. It's police business. Then it is either dull or dangerous. Come in. He followed me to the office with the gait of a man who had recently conquered mud, and meant to mention it. Wolfe stayed seated, which is his version of receiving royalty. Inspector Bell, I said, Mr. Wolfe. Bell nodded once. I won't take much of your time. You already have, Wolfe told him. Bell took that badly, but had either discipline or a mission. A man named Martin Hale came to you. He did. He is under suspicion in a murder. I would advise you not to encourage him in false hopes. Wolfe's brows went up a millimeter. You came to offer advice? I came because I have seen trouble made by private detectives who fancy themselves brighter than evidence. Then you must often be disappointed by evidence. Bell's ears reddened. Mine nearly did from pleasure. The evidence is plain. Ezra Vane was killed in his locked study. Hale admits borrowing the spare key. He had opportunity, and no account of himself for the period that matters. Indeed. Wolfe's voice was flat enough to skate on. And motive? Bell shrugged. Debt, resentment, panic. Poor men are resourceful in motive. Poor policemen also. That nearly ended it, but Bell had not driven down to be sent back empty. There's more, he said. A key ring was found in Hale's room. That got my attention, and I saw Wolfe's eyes sharpen at last. What key ring? Brass. Small. Miss Vane says the spare study key was kept on such a ring until yesterday afternoon. Hale returned the key, she says, loose. Later this ring turns up in his room. I said, found where? In the washstand drawer. That was convenient, I observed. Bell swung his head at me. Convenient or not, it's there, Wolfe said. You have the ring. Bell took it from his pocket and put it on the desk blotter, a cheap brass split ring, bright on one side, dull on the other. Wolfe looked at it longer than Bell liked. No blood, Wolfe murmured. Bell frowned. Why would there be blood? If it had been torn from a key in violence, there is none. Therefore it was removed calmly, at some other time. He lifted his eyes. Inspector, this object does not strengthen your case. It fattens it, which is different and usually fatal. Bell stared, not because he understood, but because he knew he had been contradicted by a specialist. Miss Vane identified it. Miss Vane appears eager to identify many things. Bell put out a hand for the ring. Wolfe covered it with one finger. Archie, he said, look. I looked. On the brass, there was a faint nick near the split, and beside it a smear of darker polish, as if from long friction against another key, larger than the one Clara had shown me. Not one key, but two had lived there for some time. Wolfe removed his finger. Take it, Inspector. Guard it tenderly. It may yet be useful against your theory. Bell pocketed it with the air of a man who feared it might become sarcastic in his hand. You are making a mistake. No doubt. I make several daily. Fortunately, some are superior to those of the police. Bell stood. If you interfere. Wolfe cut him off with a lift of one hand. You have no case yet, only a pattern arranged by someone who expected to be admired for tidiness. Go home, Inspector. Sleep if you can. When Bell had gone, taking indignation and muddy air with him, I shut the door and returned to the office. Well, I said, that was neighborly. Wolfe's eyes were on the hall. No, Archie, that was fear. He has been handed a locked room, a borrowed key, a nervous young man, and now a brass ring in a washstand drawer. It is too much. Even Bell senses that, though dimly, the question is whether he will resent the excess before or after he arrests Hale. You think the ring was planted. Obviously, The interesting point is not that it was planted, but when it was removed from the key, and by whom Miss Clara Vane says Hale returned the key loose. If true, she noted the absence at once. If false, she has just manufactured a memory to accompany a prop. And your wager? He closed his eyes. I do not wager, but I am beginning to dislike Miss Vane. That, from Nero Wolfe, was nearly an indictment. I took my notebook and added one more line under the others. The study was locked. The case was not. Chapter 3. Faye. The boy everyone could blame the next morning, when I told Fritz I wanted breakfast in a hurry, because I had an early train to catch. He looked at me as if I had proposed arson in the dining room. At Nero Wolfe's house, meals are not rushed. They occur. Still, he produced eggs, sausages, toast and coffee with only a moderate amount of silent reproach. And by 8:30 I was on my way back to Riddle Street with Inspector Bell's brass ring and Clara Vane's eager memory taking turns in my mind. There are faces that inspire confidence, faces that challenge it, and faces that get a man blamed before he opens his mouth. Martin Hale had one of the last kind. It wasn't that there was anything villainous about him. He looked too worried to be villainous. But he had the unfortunate gift of appearing guilty of whatever had most recently gone wrong in his neighborhood. If a window were broken, you would first ask Martin whether he had seen who did it. Then, looking at him, you would ask whether he had perhaps done it himself. That sort of face is a social handicap in the best of circumstances, and nearly fatal in the presence of murder. He met me again at the station, this time with less hope and more exhaustion. You came back, he said, as if that alone deserved gratitude. I had a return ticket in principle. Drive. He drove toward Riddle Street through a wet grey morning that made the town look like a pencil sketch someone had smudged with a thumb. On the way I asked him questions without warning him, which is often the best way. You quarreled with Ezra Vane about wages. His hands tightened on the wheel. Who told you? Nobody. It was waiting to be told. He let out a breath. Last month, he had hired me to sort account books from a property sale and said he would pay me on Saturday. Excellent, I said. Always useful, after a murder. I know. Anyone hear it. His sister and Mrs. Kipp, probably sound travels in that house. There it was. Martin Hale poor, uncertain, occasionally indebted, and on record calling the dead man dishonest. Add the borrowed key and you could have wrapped him for the county fair. You owe money. A little. To dangerous people. Number to ordinary ones. A grocer, a tailor, and my uncle, who makes his loans feel moral. That's a relief. Ordinary creditors are tiresome, but seldom homicidal. He cut me a glance that nearly wanted to be a smile and then failed from fatigue. Do they really think I did it? Yes. All of them. Enough. He nodded once, as if merely confirming whether. Miss Vane told them about the key before anyone asked. I heard that at the station. Who told you? Mrs. Antrim. She came to look helpful and ended by looking curious. She said Miss Vane told Chief Benizzi at once before he had finished seeing the body. That interested me more than I let show. Exact words. Number only that she said. You should know the key was in Martin Hale's hands this afternoon. I see. He drove in silence for a little while, then said, Do you think that means she wants me blamed? I think when a person in a murder house hurries to point at another person, the hurry matters. That sounds like Mr. Wolfe. It should. He paid for it first. I had him stop before we reached the Vane house. Go on to the store, your room, church, or Patagonia, but not with me. If Bell sees me walking about with you, he'll develop a theory about conspiracy and need fresh paper. He nodded and drove off. I watched the car rattle away and then turned toward the Vane house on foot. Mrs. Kipp answered my ring after a delay long enough to suggest that she had considered pretending nobody lived there. She was broad, red-cheeked, and wrapped in a faded apron that had long since given up trying to remain white. One eye looked at me. The other looked at my intentions and disliked them. Miss Vane ain't receiving, she said. That is all right. I am not receiving either. I showed my card, Archie Goodwin. I know what it says. She still ain't receiving. I only want to ask you a few questions that produced a snort that may once have been laughter. Questions is what's killed peace in this house. I doubt it was questions. Her mouth pinched. You from the fat detective? Yes, ha. This, from Mrs. Kipp, amounted to opening negotiations. I pressed. You heard Martin Hale quarrel with Ezra Vane about wages. She wiped her hands on her apron, did? Yes. Who started it? Mr. Vane. If you call cheating a start, young Hale done the work and Mr. Vane shaved the pay. Was Hale violent? Not unless words now break bones. He was hot, though, said Mr. Vane, would skin a flea for the hide. She almost smiled. That part was true enough. Who else disliked Ezra Vane? She gave me a stare. You want the list alphabetic? That many? That many. He kept accounts for half the district and secrets for the other half. Folks paid him because they had to, and hated him because they knew him. Did Miss Vane hate him? That brought the stare back harder. She kept house for him 15 years. That wasn't my question. Mrs. Kipp shifted her weight. Miss Clara respected him. That answer was worth twice the one I had asked for. People who love say love. People who hate deny hate. People in between say respect. Yesterday afternoon, I said. Did you see Martin Hale arrive? Yes, borrow the key. Number, I was in the pantry, but I heard Miss Clara tell him to use the study door and put the parcel on the desk. He came out quickly. Yes. How did Miss Clara react? Mrs. Kipp's lips pursed, like she hadn't expected it. Not surprised exactly, more put out. Put out because I ain't a mind reader. Try it for exercise. She looked over my shoulder to make sure Clara wasn't materializing from the wallpaper. Well then, because she was listening for something and didn't hear it. That was better than anything I had hoped for before 10 o'clock. Listening for what? Mrs. Kipp shook her head. If I knew that, I'd be in your trade and wearing a necktie, not fit for daylight. I let the insult pass out of professional gratitude. What happened after Martin left? Mr. Dora come by, the lawyer. He waited in the hall, knocked on the study door, called Mr. Vane's name once, then twice. No answer. Miss Clara said, her brother must have gone out by the yard door. Mr. Dora said, the window showed no sign of it, which I thought was odd talk for a lawyer. You heard that? I hear. Plenty when folks think I don't. Did Miss Vane seem alarmed then? Number cool as the gravy after supper. That was interesting too. A woman whose brother may be missing from his locked study and who remains cool at 4. 30 is either very controlled or very informed, I asked. When was the body found? At supper call, 6:30. That's when Miss Clara made noise enough for scripture. You believe she had not looked in the study between 4:30 and 6:30? Mrs. Kipp rubbed a thumb against her apron seam. Believe, in this house. Number, but I know what I seen, and I seen her pass that door twice and not open it. Why not? You tell me. It was her brother in there. She lowered her voice. Unless she knew he wasn't answering. The front stair creaked. Mrs. Kipp stiffened. That's enough. Clara Vane entered the hall, saw me, and became a degree thinner. Mr. Goodwin, I thought yesterday exhausted your curiosity. Not quite. I am durable. Mrs. Kipp, go about your work. The maid went, not before giving me one quick side glance that said I had better use what I had got. Clara faced me. If you are here to rehabilitate Martin Hale, you waste effort. He had every reason to resent my brother. Many people did. He had more, because he was poor, because he was weak. There are some words that reveal more about the speaker than the target. Weak from Clara Vane came out with a private bitterness, as if weakness in others was an insult to her standards. Yet you were charitable enough, I said, to mention the borrowed key before anyone asked. Her chin lifted. Naturally, the police needed the facts. That promptly. I saw no advantage in delay, nor in letting them discover it for themselves. You are impertinent. That has been mentioned. Miss Vane, a person eager to be useful in a murder inquiry, is sometimes only eager to choose the direction in which everyone should look. Her eyes flashed. Are you accusing me? Number, I am admiring your efficiency. She took one step nearer. Martin Hale quarreled with my brother, took the key, entered the room, and lied about his nerves. If the truth harms him, that is not my doing. Maybe not. Who told Inspector Bell about the missing brass key ring? She stared. That was answer enough, but I waited. At once, I added, or after it turned up conveniently in Martin Hale's washstand drawer. Color touched her cheekbones and vanished. I don't know what you mean. Then Bell is ahead of you. A man's voice came from the front door. And you are behind me, Goodwin. Inspector Bell entered with the heavy triumph of someone who has found fresh string for his package. He carried his hat in one hand and official certainty in the other. Clara turned to him with visible relief, which made me mark them side by side in my mind, whether they liked it or not. Bell said, Hale's room has been searched again. We found one of Ezra Vane's account sheets there, folded in a coat pocket. I looked at him. Did you indeed? Yes. What account sheet? A tenancy record. Vane's initials on it. No reason for Hale to have it. Except that someone put it there. Bell's jaw hardened. You're getting tiresome. That's because your evidence keeps arriving in installments like bad theatre, Clara said sharply. Inspector, surely this proves. Bell cut her off, which was the first sensible thing he had done in my presence. It proves we are progressing. He looked at me. Hale is coming in at noon. For questioning, for arrest. He turned and went back out, leaving mud on the mat and the word arrest hanging in the hall like damp laundry. Clara Vane drew a breath that sounded almost like satisfaction before she disguised it as distress. That was enough for me. Wolf had murmured the night before that her helpfulness was charitable in a very uncommon kind. And now the uncommon charity was ripening like fruit left too long in a locked pantry. I tipped my hat. Miss Vane, thank you. You have been extremely useful. She did not like the way I said it. Good. I left her there in the hall, upright and correct, and certain that she had merely assisted truth, while I went in search of the lawyer Dora and the Dr. Vollard. With one thought growing steadily more agreeable, Martin Hale had become the boy everyone could blame, which usually means someone older and cleverer has been laying the table for him all along. Chapter 4. Faye. The sister in mourning, when a woman has had 20 years of managing a household, a brother, and her own opinion of the world. She does not collapse into grief. She arranges it. Clara Vane had arranged hers with the same economy she probably used on linen closets and unwelcome callers. By the time I saw her again that afternoon, after my interview with Inspector Bell and a discouragingly pompous 10 minutes with Dr. Vollard, she was in black silk instead of black serge, had a handkerchief placed exactly where it could be used without disordering anything, and looked like a memorial service illustrated in a high-class magazine. That doesn't mean she wasn't grieving. It means she was doing it with supervision. I returned to the Vane house because Wolf had phoned from New York and told me to, in a tone which implied that if I failed to extract something new from Clara Vane, I might as well stay in Riddle Street and become a notary. Press her, he had said. Not brutally. She is too disciplined for that. But there is strain in discipline. Find where it begins to crack. Thanks, I told him. And if it doesn't, then you have failed. Which is Wolf's idea of encouragement. Miss Vane received me in the back parlor this time, a room clearly reserved for serious visitors and upholstered principals. The curtains were half drawn against the wet light. A coal fire gave the room warmth without comfort. She sat upright on a narrow sofa and indicated a chair with the kind of gesture queens make when granting conquered nobles permission to exist. You are persistent, she said. I try never to leave a good annoyance unfinished. If you have come to ask again whether I am mistaken about Martin Hale, save your breath. I hadn't planned to use much. I want to hear about your brother. That altered her expression a shade. Not softened it. Clara Vane did not soften, but she adjusted. My brother, she said, was a private man. That is often said of dead men by people who prefer them silent. Her mouth thinned. He had become more secretive lately than usual. Yes. How? She folded the handkerchief once, precisely. For the last 3 weeks he kept one ledger locked in his desk. He was not in the habit of locking books. He guarded that one. What kind of ledger? I do not know, you asked. Of course. And he told you that it was business, that I was not to concern myself. For a brother and sister sharing a house, that sounds frosty. We were not children, Mr. Goodwin. Number children sometimes explain more. She let that pass. He had also refused to discuss a business matter that worried him. What business matter? I do not know that either. I heard him twice on the telephone speaking sharply to someone. Once he said, "You may threaten elsewhere. I keep records." Another time he said, "If this comes out, it will not be to your profit." Did you recognize the voice? I heard only his side. Men's business often sounds theatrical when overheard. This did not. For the first time there was real conviction in her tone. He was uneasy. That interested me. Either it was true, or she had decided to broaden the field of suspicion beyond Martin Hale without surrendering Martin Hale. Both possibilities were useful. Did he tell anyone? I asked. Not me, Mr. Dora, the lawyer. I don't know. Martin Hale. She gave me a look that should have chilled brass. Certainly not. Yet Martin had been in the office before. Yes. The answer came almost before I had finished. How often? A few times, errands, bookkeeping scraps, carrying papers from one place to another. So he knew the house. Well enough. The study. Yes. The side door, the hall, the yard entrance. Yes. And might have returned unseen. She met my eyes squarely. Certainly. That was too smooth. Not merely prompt but polished. As if the sentence had been living in her pocket waiting for daylight. I leaned back and let a little silence sit between us. Silence is useful when someone has spoken too well. Finally, I said, if you distrusted Martin Hale enough to think he might return unseen and kill your brother, why did you lend him the key at all? She answered at once. Because he seemed harmless then. There it was, quick, ready, and finished with a little click, like a drawer shutting. A sentence prepared in advance, trimmed of splinters and waiting to be used. I kept my face blank. Harmless then, I repeated. Not harmless now. Evans alter judgment. True, but not usually with such syntax. I leaned forward. Miss Vane, that answer was waiting for me. Color touched her cheek, and for an instant I saw something not rehearsed, not panic. She had too much pride for panic, but annoyance that the line she had selected from her little cabinet of correctness had not gone down whole. You make conversation sound criminal, she said. Only when it has planning behind it. Her fingers tightened on the handkerchief. I lent him the key because my brother expected the parcel, because there was no reason at that moment to suspect harm, and because I had a household to manage. Is that sufficiently untidy for you? Much better. She looked away toward the fire. You are offensive. I work at it. I let her sit with that, then moved sideways. Tell me about the locked ledger. I have told you all I know. Number, you have told me all you meant to tell easily. Where was it kept? In the desk. Which drawer? She hesitated. The lower right. Locked. Yes. Always, lately, yes. Did your brother carry the key? I assume so. Assume. I never saw it. Then how do you know the ledger existed? Because I saw it once when he was using it. Dark green cover. No label, large, small, foolscap size, perhaps. She lifted a shoulder. Do you intend to solve the murder by stationer's details? Sometimes murder loses to stationer's details. That nearly got a response out of her, but she controlled it. Clara Vane had the kind of control some people mistake for innocence and others for virtue. I have learned to mistake it for neither. I asked, after Martin Hale borrowed the key and left the parcel, did you yourself enter the study before supper? Number, not at all. Number, Mrs. Kipp says you passed the door twice. I passed many doors. It is a house, not a prison corridor. That wasn't the question. Her eyes sharpened. No, Mr. Goodwin, I did not enter. Though your brother failed to answer Mr. Dorrer at 4:30. Yes, you were not alarmed. I thought he had gone out by the yard. Without telling you. My brother did not report his movements. Did he usually leave the study lamp burning? That checked her. A fraction, but enough. I don't know, really, in 15 years of keeping his house. She lowered the handkerchief to her lap. You enjoy insolence. I enjoy information more, did he? Number not usually. There, a man absent from his study, lamp burning, window bolted, papers neat, no answer to a caller, and his sister not alarmed. That added up badly for her. Then why weren't you worried? She stood up. For Clara Vane, that was near an emotional scene. Because Mr. Goodwin, I had been worried for weeks. Because Ezra had become secretive, abrupt, and often impossible. Because if he chose to ignore Mr. Dorrer, or step out by the yard without explanation, it was in keeping with his temper. Is that enough? Possibly. I stayed seated. Who threatened him? I told you, I don't know. Who could he have meant by, I keep records? I don't know. Could Martin Hale have known about the green ledger? Number that came so fast I nearly smiled. You're sure? Yes, why? Because Ezra did not trust him. You didn't trust him either, apparently, but you handed him the key. She had no quick answer ready for that one, and the pause did more work than speech. Then she said, carefully, Mr. Hale was useful in small things. That is not trust. Fine distinction, necessary distinction. I got up. One more. Did your brother have enemies? Her face changed then, just enough to show me that the question landed where she had not expected it. Everyone has enemies, she said. A philosopher in mourning. A bookkeeper in mourning. Ezra handled people's weaknesses for a living. They paid him to keep order in their affairs, and resented him for knowing what disorder looked like. That's good, I said. She frowned. What is? That line. Did you prepare it too? This time the flash in her eyes was pure anger. Get out. I went. In the hall I found Mrs. Kipp, polishing the umbrella stand, with a concentration that would have deceived no one born after infancy. She gave me a sideways glance. Well, she muttered. She wears grief properly, I said. Mrs. Kipp snorted. Miss Clara wears everything properly. That's half the trouble. Did Ezra Vane keep a green ledger locked in his desk? The polishing slowed. Might, you knew. I knew there was one book he didn't want touched. Did Miss Clara know? Mrs. Kipp looked at me over the rag. In this house, Miss Clara knew when a spoon moved. Did she ever try to see it? That got me a tiny movement of the mouth. Once, he caught her at the desk and spoke so cold I near put on a shawl. There recently. 10 days back. Did they quarrel? Number not then, but after she was quiet in the hard way. There are many kinds of quiet. I knew the type. Any other visitors besides Dora and Martin that afternoon? She thought. Mr. Phelps from the grain office come by near 3:30. But he left from the front step when he heard Mr. Vane was in no mood. Who told him that? Miss Clara, interesting. If Ezra had returned from the post office before 4 and gone straight to his study, Clara had already begun filtering visitors by 3:30, either from habit or design. Did she say why he was in no mood? Number just that, he wouldn't see callers. I let that settle. Then, Mrs. Kipp, when Miss Clara lent Martin Hale the key, did it strike you as odd? She gave the umbrella stand one last savage rub. It struck me as convenient. For whom? For somebody, she said. And I don't hold with conveniences that happen right before supper and murder. I thanked her and went outside into the damp afternoon. Riddle Street had the quiet of places where news has already spread and is now being improved indoors. Curtains twitched. A boy across the street pretended to tie his shoe while watching me. Somebody in the drugstore window was not buying cough syrup with full attention. I walked down to the corner and found a telephone booth that smelled of wet wood and stale tobacco. Wolf answered on the third ring. Well, he said. Clara Vane says Ezra had grown secretive, kept a locked green ledger in his desk, and was worried about some business matter he would not discuss. She also says Martin knew the study and might have returned unseen. And when I asked why she lent him the key if she distrusted him, she answered too quickly, because he had seemed harmless then. Wolf was silent for a beat. Then, prepared. Yes, polished, ready, and folded small. Good. People who prepare innocence usually require guilt. That's catchy. Want it embroidered. Number, what about the ledger? Mrs. Kipp confirms it existed and says Clara once tried to get at it. Ah, that sounded pleased. I am a mourning sister with a prepared phrase, an appetite for a locked ledger, and an eagerness to point outward. Proceed. To what? To the doctor again, if he can be bullied into precision, to Dorr, the lawyer, and to the desk lock if Belle has not already worshipped it into uselessness. You think Clara wanted the ledger? I think she wanted something. Find whether it was paper, money, or liberty. The line clicked dead. I left the booth and stood a moment under the low sky, looking back toward the Vane house. Clara Vane had worn grief properly. Yes, but she had worn other things properly too. Suspicion, helpfulness, self-command. Only the little sentence in her pocket, because Martin had seemed harmless then, had shown a crease. And in Nero Wolfe's trade, a crease in a prepared answer is often where the whole garment starts to tear. Chapter 5. Faye. The ledger without a lock. Nero Wolfe hates travel with a moral firmness that would have served a saint if it had been directed at sin instead of locomotion. He will leave the brownstone for reasons of life, death, or gastronomy in that order, and even then only under protest. So when, at 11:15 the next morning, he announced that we were going to Riddle Street together, I looked up from my desk to make sure he had not suffered a blow to the head. You? I said. Yes, imbecile. Me. He glared at the hat I was holding. If Mr. Bell and his companions continue pawing at this matter, essential detail will be destroyed by civic diligence. I prefer to inspect it before they improve it further. Shall I notify the mayor? Notify Fritz that lunch will be delayed and that I am already bitter. By 1:30 we were in a hired car headed north, with Wolfe bulked beside me like an offended monument, his lips compressed against the indignity of motion. He endured the trip by closing his eyes, opening them only when a bad turn in the road implied personal insult. When we reached Riddle Street, he looked out once at the damp houses and said, "Pefu," which in Wolfe's language covers architecture, weather, social ambition, and municipal planning. Inspector Bell met us at the Vane house, and if he had been forced to invite the Pope to witness his arrest, he could not have looked less pleased. But Wolfe's name still had weight, even where intelligence did not. Bell held the door open as though it pained him physically. "You may look," he said, "but nothing is to be disturbed." Wolfe turned his head and regarded Bell in a manner usually reserved for insects, found in butter. "Sir, when I disturb things, they stay disturbed." I nearly enjoyed Bell's expression enough to forget the weather. Clara Vane received Wolfe with the same rigid correctness she had given me, plus an extra degree of moral caution, appropriate to larger prey. She was in black again, with grief now settled into routine. Wolfe bowed from the neck. "No more. Miss Vane, I regret the circumstances." "Thank you, Mr. Wolfe." He glanced around the hall. "No doubt, Archie, the study." We went in, Bell followed. Clara remained in the doorway as if unwilling to trust either Wolfe or the room unattended. The study looked as before, dark shelves, neat desk, lamp, bolted window, and the black marble mantel clock still standing mutely at 5:07. The bronze horse had been removed again for official reasons, which improved the taste if not the evidence. Wolfe crossed to the desk and stood looking down at it, his eyes moving over the drawers, keyholes, blotter, and grain of wood with a concentration that always reminds me of a cat considering whether a hole deserves patience. He did not touch anything for nearly a minute. Then he said, "Who has opened these drawers since Mr. Vane's death?" Bell answered, "I have." "The doctor, Chief Benizzi. We made an inventory." "Of course you did." Wolf bent closer to the right hand pedestal. Archie. I joined him. The lower right drawer showed a small brass lock plate, polished by use. Around it, the wood was unmarred, but the screws were brighter than the plate, with edges sharper and less dulled than the others on the desk. Below the escutcheon, near the line of the drawer front, were two shallow scratches almost parallel, no longer than a fingernail. New screws, I said. Yes, Bell snorted. So, Wolf straightened a little. So the lock has been replaced recently. Bell folded his arms. That proves nothing. It proves replacement, Wolf said. You may proceed from there as your talents permit. I took out my notebook. The scratches, not from forcing, Wolf said. Too slight and too controlled. Someone opened the drawer patiently, probably with thin metal, after which the lock was changed to conceal the entry. Bell said. Or Ezra Vane had the lock repaired. Wolf turned. Then the screws on the neighboring drawer should show equal freshness if the desk had been generally serviced. They do not, and Miss Vane. Clara stiffened. What? Did your brother mention replacing the lock? Number, did he often have furniture repaired without informing the household? Number, Wolf grunted and lowered himself into the desk chair, an act which by itself altered the room's center of gravity. He opened the drawer. Inside were loose papers, 2 ruled notebooks, envelopes, and at the back a dark green ledger of foolscap size with no label. The book, I said. Bell moved half a step. We've seen that. I am sure, Wolf said. Yet you have not understood it. He lifted the ledger out and laid it on the blotter. His thick fingers turned pages with surprising delicacy. Columns of figures ran in a tidy hand. Dates, initials, amounts, destinations, balances. Not flashy enough for crime fiction, but to Wolf a set of figures is often more eloquent than a confession. I leaned over. Shipping accounts. Yes, Mr. Vane managed a small freight and forwarding office, in addition to his local papers. Convenient, modest, vulnerable, Bell said. There's nothing there but routine transactions. Wolf ignored him and turned several more pages. Then he stopped. His eyes narrowed. Archie. Look at the withdrawals marked as handling adjustments. I looked. Every few pages there was a small debit. $17, $22, $14.30, one never large, never repeated in exact pattern, always entered under one or another minor account. Each alone was the kind of amount no busy man wakes in the night over. Together, across months, they formed a different sentence. Wolf tapped a line. Quietly, a parasite with bookkeeping manners. Bell frowned. That could be error. Repeated, error distributed cunningly over several months. Number theft. Wolf turned more pages. And here, corrections in a darker ink. Mr. Vane had begun checking the entries. He was tracing the leakage. That changed the air in the room. Even Bell felt it, though he tried not to, Clara said sharply. Are you certain? Wolf lifted his eyes to her. No, madam. I am never certain until I have been bored by all alternatives, but I am near it. He put one broad finger on a column. These small sums are arranged to sleep unnoticed. Yet to the thief, they are not small at all. Over time they become substantial. A man stealing in teaspoons may end by drowning in them. I said, if Ezra uncovered it, motive improves. Massively, Wolf said. Murder, then, does not spring from sudden passion. It has cultivation. It is watered carefully like a poisonous plant. A charming question, Wolf said. What indeed does Mr. Hale work in the shipping office? Number, has he access to these books? Number, can he profit from tiny adjustments over months? Bell's mouth flattened. Not likely. Then perhaps, Wolf said, you should stop hugging him as if he were a solved problem. Bell flushed darkly. A man can kill for one reason while another man steals for a different one. Yes, and a cow may compose madrigals. We are speaking of likelihood. Clara had gone very still, not the stillness of innocence hearing complexity, but the stillness of someone watching a floorboard creak under a hidden weight. Wolf resumed turning pages. There were check marks in Ezra Vane's hand besides several of the suspicious entries. At the last such mark, on a transaction dated 3 days before the murder, Ezra had written in the margin only one word: "Verify. Has the shipping office been searched?" Wolf asked Bell. "Not yet thoroughly." "Then do so, unless paperwork offends you. Also identify who had access to these accounts." Bell said nothing, which from him was progress. I had moved to inspect the drawer front more closely. The scratches below the lock were faint but definite, and one screw sat very slightly higher than the others, as if seated by a hand more careful than expert. There was also, in the inside corner of the drawer, a dust shadow, showing where some small object had lain for a long time and recently been removed. "Something else was kept here," I said. Wolf nodded. "Probably the original key." Clara spoke too fast. "But I told you he carried it." Wolf turned his head. "You assumed he carried it." A spot of color rose in her cheeks. "Very well, I assumed." "Badly," Wolf said. He closed the ledger, not gently, but with decision. "Miss Vane, who besides your brother knew of this book?" "No one," she said. "Mrs. Kipp says you once tried to see it." The color deepened. Bell looked from Wolf to Clara, with the interest of a man finding a new direction to be suspicious in. "I was curious," Clara said. "My brother had grown secretive in his own house. That is not a crime." "No," Wolf agreed, "but curiosity is the vestibule of many." Bell stepped in. "This is wandering. Theft in the shipping office doesn't put a killer in this room." Wolf gave him a glance full of weary contempt. "Inspector, if Ezra Vane discovered that someone had been siphoning money for months, and if he began to verify the fraud, then his death becomes explicable to an intelligence above cabbage level." I said. "Who ran the shipping office?" Bell answered reluctantly. "A clerk named Owen Bristow handled most daily entries. Vane reviewed them weekly." "Bristow," Wolf repeated. "Age, habits, family, debts." Bell scowled. "How should I know?" Wolf looked at me. "Archie, note that. The police have a suspect, but no curiosity." That one landed. Bell made a half movement and checked it, probably because assaulting Nero Wolf in front of a bereaved gentlewoman would complicate his career. Wolf rose from the chair, and the chair seemed relieved. He crossed to the mantel and regarded the stopped clock again. "Still at 5:07, he murmured. Bell said, "We left it as found." "Excellent. At least one thing in this house has resisted you." He turned back to the desk and held out the ledger to me. "This goes nowhere without a receipt. Inspector, have it copied thoroughly. If you lose it, I shall mention your name in a room full of newspapermen." Bell took the book because refusing would have looked foolish even to him. Clara said, "Mr. Wolf, are you suggesting my brother was killed over embezzlement?" "I suggest nothing yet. I observe that the dead are sometimes less obedient than the living, and ledgers less obedient than either. Your brother kept this hidden, verified entries, and then died. The sequence deserves respect." She pressed the handkerchief against one palm. "If this concerns the shipping office, then Martin Hale may still be innocent," Wolf said. "Yes, try to bear it." That nearly cracked her. Not openly. Clara Vane had too much pride to flare before witnesses, but I saw the tiny tightening at the corners of her mouth. Wolf saw it too. We left the study and went to the front room, where Bell could mutter privately into a county telephone about Owen Bristow and the shipping office. Wolf lowered himself into a chair with the relief of a transported emperor and accepted a glass of water from Mrs. Kipp, who looked at him as if he might, with encouragement, turn the house upside down and shake out proper answers. When Bell had gone to the hall, Wolf said quietly to Clara, "Madam, when did you first know your brother suspected theft?" She stared. "I did not know. Afortai, you are intelligent and resentful, a dangerous combination in a household. I resent your tone." "I am not selling tone," answer. She looked toward the hall to make sure Bell was out of earshot. "I knew only that Ezra was worried. I did not know why. Yet you tried to open the drawer 10 days ago." Her fingers stopped moving. Mrs. Kipp talks too much. She hears enough to economize on invention. Why did you try? Clara's chin rose. Because my brother had become impossible. Because he shut me out. Because if trouble threatened this house, I meant to know it. That rang partly true, which is often the most useful kind. Wolf nodded once. And did you open it? Number? You are lying. It came so softly that it hit harder. Clara's eyes widened. I beg your pardon. You opened it. Wolf said, not by force, patiently. Then the lock was replaced. Did you read the ledger? For one stretched second, I thought she might deny it again. Then something in her face shifted. Not surrender, not yet, but calculation forced to move its pieces. I saw some figures, she said. Nothing more. A great deal more, enough to know your brother had discovered theft. She did not answer. Wolf rose. Good, Archie, we are done here. Outside, while the hired car turned in the lane, I looked at him. You pushed hard. Not hard enough. He settled himself with a grunt. But we gained two facts. She opened that drawer, and she is frightened by the ledger. Because she stole, number because she knows who did, or because she fears what the discovery may expose besides theft. The car started toward the station road. Rain had begun again, thin and persistent. Riddle Street blurred behind us, all its curtains and opinions turning watery. I said, if Ezra uncovered embezzlement, then the murder was prepared. Yes, not passion, number cultivated. Exactly, Wolf closed his eyes, like a poisonous plant. That was his signal for silence. But I wrote one line in my notebook anyway before the road got too rough. The ledger had no lock of its own. It did not need one. Men were killing to keep it unread. Chapter 6. Fay, the staged borrowing back in the brownstone. With dinner behind him and beer before him, Wolf became interested in the key. That sentence may sound modest, but in Nero Wolf's office an interest in one small object can amount to a death warrant for somebody's lies. He had the notes spread before him, not untidily, because nothing on his desk is ever untidy, except by my standards, which are humane and elastic. I sat opposite, reading aloud the parts that mattered. Martin Hale sent for the ledger parcel, Clara Vane lending the spare key, Mrs. Kipp hearing the instruction, neighbors seeing Martin arrive, Belle embracing the obvious, and Clara hurrying to mention the borrowed key before anyone had even finished being shocked by a corpse. Wolf's eyes were closed, but not in sleep. Again, he said. Which part? The beginning, not the murder. The borrowing. So I gave it to him once more. Clara had asked Martin Hale to fetch a wrapped ledger from Hibbard's store because Ezra wanted it. Martin brought it in daylight. Clara met him, gave him the spare key, and told him to place the parcel on Ezra's desk. Mrs. Kipp heard it. At least one neighbor saw Martin enter the house. Clara later told the police about the borrowed key at once, before they had asked the right questions, or, apparently, any questions at all. Wolf opened his eyes. It is too public. That had occurred to me. Number, it has not occurred to you enough. He tapped one finger on the arm of the chair. A key borrowed privately gives access. A key borrowed publicly gives memory. I said nothing. He went on. Miss Vane did not merely lend the key. She arranged a performance. Mr. Hale was sent on an errand where people could later remember him. He arrived in daylight. The parcel was wrapped, visible, ordinary. Mrs. Kipp heard the instruction. The key passed from Clara's hand to Martin's hand, where the fact could be repeated later with pious certainty. A staged borrowing. Yes. Wolf's lip curled. Almost theatrical. I leaned back. Then the key was never important as access. Exactly, it was important as narrative. He picked up the pencil, not to write, but to point. If Martin needed to enter the study secretly, why choose the hour when half the household and perhaps half the street could place him there? Why not after dark? Why not by the yard? Why not avoid the very publicity which now condemns him? Because he didn't need access, I said. Clara needed witnesses. Wolf grunted approval. At last the borrowing was not chance. It was planted. Memory, once planted, can be harvested later as evidence. I got up, crossed to the globe, and back again. Then Clara sent him for the parcel herself. Of course, not Ezra. Probably not. Or if Ezra had once mentioned it, she chose the time of delivery. That makes Martin a walking exhibit. A very suitable one. Poor, nervous, resentful, and available. I thought of Martin Hale's face, the kind that looked apologetic even when it had done nothing. The boy, everyone could blame. Yes. Wolf reached for his beer and took a measured swallow. Archie traced the sequence. Clara wants Martin linked unmistakably to the study. She causes him to fetch a document. She lends him the key in plain sight. She ensures at least one servant knows it. Later, upon discovery of the body, she announces the fact before anyone can fail to hear it. She is not reporting evidence, I said. She is caching it. Precisely. I stopped pacing. Then the key trail was built in advance. Yes, and Martin's borrowing was never for entry at all. Wolf nodded. Not for access, for blame. The office was quiet a moment. From the kitchen came the faint clink of Fritz, arranging some future perfection. Outside, New York moved in its usual noisy indifference. Inside, the thing had turned one notch more exact. He said, if Clara staged the borrowing, she expected a murder before supper. Number more likely, she expected the possibility of one, or had agreed to circumstances in which it might occur. She is too controlled for improvisation. That's a narrow distinction. In homicide, Wolf said dryly, narrow distinctions are the width of the road. He closed his eyes again. But the matter was not closed. I knew the signs. The key had finished being a convenience and become a design, and when Nero Wolfe begins to suspect that an innocent man borrowed not a key but a role, someone else's part in the play is usually very near its last act. Chapter 7. Fay, the man in the back passage. There are times in an investigation when all the facts look respectable and all the people do not. By then we had a murdered man, a borrowed key, a sister who kept supplying the police with useful direction, and a green ledger that had turned from bookkeeping into motive. What we still lacked was the simple, vulgar necessity of murder. A body can't kill itself, however obliging the evidence may try to be. Wolf was in the office the next morning, with one eye on me and the other, figuratively, on the men connected with Ezra Vane's shipping office. Inspector Bell, reluctantly prodded, had sent over names the night before: Gavin Reed, senior bookkeeper, Owen Bristow, shipping clerk, and a junior assistant named Felton, who seemed too young to embezzle without first asking permission. Wolf had read the list, grunted at it, and circled Reed's name with a pencil. Why him? I had asked. Because, Wolf said, the trusted subordinate is always worth inspection. Trust is economical. It saves thought. So I went back to Riddle Street again, beginning to feel like a commuter to homicide. Rain had cleared, leaving the town washed and ugly. At the Vane house I did not ask for Clara. I asked for Mrs. Kipp and learned from her, with only moderate sulking, that the charwoman came on Thursdays to scrub the back hall and pantry. Her name was Mrs. Pritchard, and I found her at a little house 3 doors down a lane behind the church, beating a rug in a yard that looked as if it had surrendered to soap years ago. She was small, wiry, and inclined to suspicion as a first principle. When I gave my name, she made a face. More questions? Yes, I already told the police. That's all right. They may have missed the good part. That interested her enough to put the rug beater down. They miss plenty, I depend on it. I got her started with time, place, weather, and routine. On the night Ezra Vane died, she had come back after supper because she had left her shawl in the pantry. She used the service path at the side of the house. As always, it was around 9 o'clock, perhaps a little after. The Vane household was in confusion by then, but the back of the house was dim and quiet. I heard a step, she said. Soft, like not sneaking exactly, Careful. Where? In the back passage by the pantry. There's that service door, you know. I know. And I seen a man go out it. That woke things up. You told Bell this? I told somebody in a hat, might have been him. He said if I didn't know who it wasn't much use. Bell again. I made a note to send him flowers with poison ivy woven in. What did you see? Broad man, shoulders wide. Hat pulled down. He moved heavy but slow, like he didn't want the floor to speak. Could it have been Martin Hale? Number, you know Hale, by sight. That weren't him. Why not? Too tall, for one thing, and this one moved older. That's good evidence from a charwoman, not scientific. Maybe, but house, trained. People who scrub floors know how bodies move. Did you see his face? Number, just the side and the back of him. Coat. Dark. Good cloth. Not workman's, and he shut the door careful. Not running. Number scared. She considered. Not scared. Intent. That was better. A frightened man bolts. A man who leaves carefully has his emotions in order. Did he come from the study direction? Yes. Back passage runs there, if you know the house. And did you hear anything before that? Voices, drawers, a bump. Number, only the step and the door. I pressed some more, but that was the meat of it. Broad-shouldered, older than Martin, cautious, leaving by the service door around 9. If true, and I liked her, then somebody had been in the house long after the official discovery, or had returned after it. Either Bell had lost control of the premises, which I would have bet on with enthusiasm, or someone with standing had moved about after murder under cover of confusion. I took the next train back and found Wolf in the office, installed with beer and superior patience. Well, he said. Mrs. Pritchard, charwoman, heard a soft step in the back passage around 9 o'clock, the night of the murder, and saw a broad-shouldered man leave by the service door. Not Martin, too tall, she says, and this one moved with the heavy caution of an older man. Wolf's eyes narrowed. At last what? A body continue. I gave him the rest. Good cloth coat, hat down, careful exit, not running, not panicked. A man who knew enough to use the back. Wolf nodded slowly. That excludes Mr. Hale provisionally, and points towards someone at ease in the house, or in houses like it. Bell apparently heard it and dismissed it because she couldn't supply a face. Bell would dismiss the resurrection for lack of signed affidavits. I sat. You circled Gavin Reed yesterday. Yes. Why him rather than Bristow? Bristow is a clerk. Reed is a trusted bookkeeper. Mild men in trusted positions are given privacy, and privacy is profitable. Wolf lifted the beer, then set it down untouched. Also Mrs. Pritchard says broad, shouldered and older. What do we know of Reed's appearance? From Bell's notes, 48, medium height, solid build, quiet, no family, works late, considered dependable. There, dependable is what stupid people say when they have stopped observing. That sounded like Wolf, and it also sounded right. Quiet men get mistaken for safe men every day. Chapter 8. Faye. The bookkeepers fear Gavin Reed came to the brownstone at 4:15, 10 minutes late, which is the kind of insolence Nero Wolf notices, even when murder is involved. He was shown in by me and stood just inside the office door with his hat in both hands and the look of a man who had spent the morning trying not to sweat and had failed only in degree. He was solidly built, as Bell's description had promised, with broad shoulders, greying hair, and a face so mild it would have reassured aunts and credit managers. Mild faces have done a great deal of harm in the world. They get trusted into rooms where bolder scoundrels would be watched. Mr. Reed, I said. Nero Wolf. Sit down. He sat on the edge of the red leather chair as if prepared to rise in self-defense at any moment. Wolf regarded him across the desk without offering comfort, which is one of the many comforts he never offers. You are Ezra Vane's bookkeeper, Wolf said. Yes, sir, you were. Reed swallowed. Yes, you handled the accounts of his shipping office. Yes, and you have already lied to the police. Reed started. I have not. Do not waste our time. You denied entering Mr. Vane's study on the evening of his death. I didn't, Wolf grunted. Archie. I handed him the note from Mrs. Pritchard's interview, and Wolf did not look at it. He only spoke. A broad, shouldered older man was seen leaving by the service door near 9 o'clock. That may not prove you entered the study, but your face has already made the admission your mouth refuses. That was true. Fear had been sitting on Gavin Reed from the moment he came in. Not lively fear, not the hot panic of a beginner. Something older and finer, grained, settled over him, the way dust settles on old velvet, so deeply that brushing only spreads it. He moistened his lips. I went to the house. Yes, later. But Ezra was already dead. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Better? Why did you go? I had to speak to him at 9 o'clock. He had sent for me that afternoon. There it was. I watched Wolf hear it. Sent for you when? Wolf asked. A little after 3. A message to come at 5 if possible. Who delivered it? Miss Vane. That was also worth hearing. Did you go at 5? Number Reed's hands tightened on the hat brim. I couldn't. I was at the office. Doing what? He looked at me, then back at Wolf, as if searching for a version of truth cheap enough to afford, trying to put some things right. In the books. He shut his mouth. Wolf said, Mr. Reed, I know you have been skimming funds from the shipping accounts. The only remaining questions are scale and method. You may answer those, or I shall infer them, and my inferences are seldom flattering. Reed's shoulders sagged a fraction. The hat in his hands bent slightly under pressure. It wasn't. At first it wasn't much. It never is. Small sums. I meant to repay them. Yes, from the winnings that never came. Wolf's tone stayed flat. Gambling. Reed stared. How did you know? I possess a brain, sir. Proceed. And he did. Not all at once because confession in installments is easier on the nerves, but enough. He had begun with small handling adjustments, shifting balances from minor transactions that Ezra Vane reviewed only in bulk. Then, once the method held, he had continued. He had debts, cards, racing, 2 private loans from men less patient than banks. Nothing romantic, just the ordinary greed and weakness that turned clerks into criminals and still let them sleep for months. Ezra found it, I asked. Reed nodded miserably. He had begun checking the figures himself. Last week, he asked about 3 entries. On Tuesday, he said there were more. Wednesday, he sent for me. At 5, Wolf said. Yes. Why did you not go? Because I knew what it meant. He lifted his head then, and fear showed plain in his eyes. He would dismiss me, prosecute me, everything would come out. You preferred uncertainty. I preferred 1 more hour. Then what happened? I went at about 8:45. I thought perhaps he might still be alone. I thought I could speak to him, beg him, offer terms, anything. His voice roughened. But when I got there, the house was already upset. Someone said he was dead. I used the side way, intending to leave without being seen. I got as far as the back passage and then heard voices from the hall. I looked into the study. Why? I asked. He blinked at me. Because it was open. That stopped me. Open. Yes. The hall door was open then. There was a lamp on. I saw the desk. He swallowed. And I saw the green ledger on it. Wolf's eyes sharpened. Did you enter? Yes. For how long? A few seconds. To do what? I don't know. I only know I was mad with fear. I looked at the ledger. Then I heard someone coming and went out the service door. You touched the desk? Yes. The ledger? Yes. Anything else? He hesitated too long. Answer, Wolf said. I opened the lower drawer. Why? I thought the key might be there, or some paper naming the amounts. Something. He looked down at his hands, but the drawer was already unlocked. Wolf and I exchanged a glance. Reed, clumsy and terrified, had not arranged the thing. He was the kind who blunders into a scene and worsens it, not the kind who composes one with a borrowed key, a public errand, and planted memory. Wolf knew it too. His voice changed, not softer but colder. "Mr. Reed, you are a thief, a fool, and perhaps an accessory after the fact, but you are not elegant." Your Reed stared. "What?" "Your panic is genuine. Your theft was sloppy beneath a decent surface. The trap laid for Mr. Hale was not. It had forethought, proportion, and spite. Those are not your arts." I said, "Then who helped you?" He looked from one of us to the other, and the last of his resistance gave way not with drama but with fatigue. "I never meant." He stopped, started again. "Miss Vane knew." There it was. "How long?" Wolf asked. "Since January." "How?" "She found one of my notes, a loan demand. She asked questions. I lied badly. After that she watched me." Reed gave a bitter little sound, hardly a laugh. "Miss Clara could make watching feel like a hand on your collar. And later she said she knew Ezra trusted me too much and would ruin us both if he chose." He took a breath. "We met twice, quietly." "Where?" "In the churchyard once in the lane behind the grain office. Discussing theft." "Not at first." "At first it was only fear, my debts, her brother. The way he controlled every penny in that house. Every plan, every movement." Reed's face, mild as it was, showed something now that had probably lived there for years. Resentment too timid to stand upright until given company, he treated her like an unpaid servant who should be grateful. "And you?" "He treated me like a ledger with shoes." Wolf nodded. "A correct employer, perhaps, but not a loved one." Continue. Reed licked his lips. "When he discovered the skimming, I told her. I had to tell someone." She said, "If Ezra exposed me, he would also expose matters that would keep her tied to him forever." "What matters?" Reed looked miserable. "Debt, her own, I think. Small loans, household shortages covered in ways Ezra didn't know. Nothing like mine, but enough for shame." "So you were bound by money and she by dependence," Wolf said. "And each of you found the other convenient," Reed whispered. "Yes." "Did she propose killing him?" "No." The denial burst out fast and honest enough to make me believe at least that much. Never in words. But she said once that if Ezra were out of the way, everything would be simpler. "Many murders begin in grammar," Wolf murmured. "Who planned the key business?" We'd shut his eyes. She did. I had expected it, and still felt the little click of satisfaction. "She said Martin Hale was perfect." Reed went on, voice low and ashamed. "Always about the house on errands, always anxious, always owing someone something. She arranged for him to fetch the parcel. She said if the key passed through his hands in daylight, people would remember. She said memory was stronger than proof because people preferred it." That sounded exactly like Clara's kind of intelligence. Domestic, cold and practical. Not brilliant, but sharp enough to use what was lying nearest. "Did you kill Ezra?" I asked. Reed's head jerked up. "Did Clara?" "I don't know." He looked sick. "I swear I don't. I came later. I had avoided the 5 o'clock meeting because I was afraid. When I heard he was dead, I thought." He broke off. "You thought the world had solved your problem," Wolf said. Reed's silence was answer. "And then I went in to see whether the ledger was out, whether my name was marked, whether anything could still be saved." "And was it?" Wolf leaned back. "Mr. Reed, one of the charms of vice is that it recruits collaborators. You had motive for money. Miss Vane had motive for freedom. Between you, murder could be made to seem almost orderly." He opened his eyes wider. "But order is fragile. It leaves edges." Reed looked at him blankly. Wolf went on. "You are not the architect. You are one of the materials. Miss Vane gave Martin Hale the role, but someone still had to strike Ezra Vane." Reed's face had gone grey. "I didn't." "Perhaps not. Yet you concealed. You entered later. You touched the drawer. You tampered by your very presence. You may be hanged morally, if not legally. Reed's hands had stopped moving. That was the worst point in him. Not agitation, but the moment fear settled into acceptance. What will happen? Wolf snorted. To the guilty, I hope inconvenience. He dismissed Reed then, not kindly and not with cruelty, merely as one dismisses a poor instrument after hearing the tune it can and cannot play. I took him to the door. In the hall he paused once. I never thought it would go so far, he muttered. That, I told him, is what almost everyone says after helping murder reach its destination. When I came back to the office, Wolf was staring at the globe without seeing it. Well, I said. Well, he repeated. Reed is a thief under pressure, frightened and clumsy. Clara is harder. She supplied the elegance, public borrowing of the key, instant mention to the police. Martin selected as scapegoat. But Reed says she never proposed murder in words. People rarely do, Archie. Civilized conspiracy is conducted in implication. I sat. Then one had motive for money and one for freedom. Yes. And together they made murder look tidy. For a time. Wolf's lips tightened. But not tidy enough. There remains the hand that struck the blow. And there remains one more error. Find me that, and we finish. I looked at my notes. Reed summoned at 5, Reed absent. Clara arranging Martin's errand, Ezra dead before supper, Reed creeping back at 9 like a rat to a granary, and finding the drawer already open. The scheme was nearly complete now, almost neat enough to please Inspector Bell, which meant by Wolf's standards that one final imperfection was waiting somewhere close at hand, eager to ruin everybody who had depended on order. Chapter 9. Wolf opens the door. There is a difference between exposing a lie in Nero Wolf's office and exposing it in the house where it was born. In the office, truth has Wolf's chair behind it, my desk beside it, and Fritz somewhere beyond the door making civilization possible with butter and heat. In a provincial drawing room, truth stands on stranger legs. It sounds colder there. It also has farther to fall. Wolf decided on the Vane drawing room. By 4:30 we had them assembled. Clara Vane in black and self, Cummond Inspector Bell with the expression of a man prepared to dislike whatever he had not invented. Gavin Reed pale and broad, shouldered and trying to make mildness do one last job for him. Mrs. Kipp alert as a terrier at a rat hole. Lewis Dorr the lawyer, sleek and careful, Dr. Vollard, who had come because doctors enjoy being present when certainty changes owners, and Martin Hale, looking as if he had been invited to witness his own hanging and was not sure about the dress code. Wolf sat in the largest chair because it was the largest chair and because any other arrangement would have been false to nature. I had placed him where the firelight hit one side of his face and left the other in shadow, not for drama. Though I am not above drama, but because the room was badly lit and I wanted everyone able to see when he looked at them. The rain outside had begun again, tapping the windows with small provincial insistence. Wolf glanced around once. Good, we may proceed, Bell said. If this is another of your performances, Wolf, I warn you. Wolf lifted one finger. Bell stopped. It is one of the more agreeable spectacles I know. Inspector, Wolf said, you do not warn me. You listen. If that proves difficult, practice silence by counting to 100 and beginning again. Bell reddened, but held Martin Hale. Poor boy, looked at me as if to ask whether this was normal. Wolf folded his hands over the curve of his stomach. Ezra Vane was killed in his study. The room appeared locked against intrusion. The window was bolted. A spare key had been publicly borrowed by Mr. Martin Hale that afternoon, and Miss Clara Vane, with admirable promptness, made certain the police knew it. His eyes moved to Clara. Too admirable. Clara's chin lifted. I told the truth. Yes, Wolf said, part of it. A favorite economy among liars. Bell broke in. Miss Vane lent the key. Hale admits it. He quarreled with the dead man and... Be still, Wolf said. The key is not the method. It is the story. That stopped even Bell because it was phrased too neatly to interrupt without feeling stupid. Wolf went on. Miss Vane staged the borrowing days in advance. She arranged for Mr. Hale to fetch the parcel. The errand was public, harmless, visible. She handed him the spare key in daylight. Mrs. Kipp heard the instruction. At least one neighbor saw him come and go. Later, once Ezra Vane was found dead in a locked room, suspicion ran naturally to the man publicly linked to the key, not by accident, by design. Martin Hale made a strangled noise. Clara said sharply, "That is absurd." "Is it?" Wolf turned his head slightly. "Why, then, did you mention the borrowed key to the police before they had even finished examining your brother's body?" "Because it was relevant." "Indeed, relevant enough to be prepared. You had not yet been asked about visitors, keys, or the afternoon. Yet you supplied the fact at once. That is not grief, madam. That is management." Color came into her face. "I was trying to help," Wolf snorted. Mrs. Kipp made a small sound in her throat that might have been satisfaction wearing an apron. Belle glared at her, and then back at Wolf. Wolf ignored them all. "Mr. Hale borrowed the key and returned it. That much is true, but the borrowing was not for access, it was for memory. A key borrowed in plain sight creates witnesses. Witnesses create recollection. Recollection, once planted, can later be harvested as evidence." Louis Dorr shifted in his chair. Dr. Vollard removed his spectacles and put them back on, a nervous professional reflex. Reed stared at the carpet. Belle said, "Even if that's so, someone still had to enter the study." Wolf's brows rose. At last. He turned to Clara again. "You provided one route everyone would think of. The key, but you kept back the second means of entry, the one that mattered." She looked blank with just a little too much effort. "I don't know what you mean." "The service door latch," Wolf said. "That did it. Not much. A tiny change at the corners of her mouth, a tightening of the handkerchief in her fingers. But enough. If you watch people long enough, you learn that innocence rarely reacts to a fact. It has never considered by becoming more rigid. It usually becomes merely puzzled." Belle frowned. "What service door?" Mrs. Kipp answered, before anyone else could. "Back passage by the pantry, same one I told you about." Belle turned on her. "You said nothing about a latch." "I said plenty, you only heard the parts you liked." I nearly admired her. Wolf said, "The service door at the side passage could be left unfastened from within. Not open, merely unlatched. Such a detail would occur only to someone in the household. A stranger would not know it. Mr. Hale did not know it, but Miss Vane did. Mrs. Kipp did. Anyone long in the house did." Belle's face was working now. "You're saying Reed came in that way?" "I am saying Mr. Reed could have. He needed no key if the service entrance had been deliberately left available. The borrowed key was the story, the unlatched door was the method, and murder was the point where the two met." The room had gone very still, even the rain seemed to have thinned to hear better. Gavin Reed spoke first, and his voice came out dry. "I did not kill him." "No," Wolf said. "I know you are a thief and a coward, Mr. Reed, but not this particular murderer." Clara turned on Reed with sudden fury. "You told him—" Wolf cut across her. "Mr. Reed told me enough. More importantly, he failed to tell me what a killer would have told. He was summoned by Ezra Vane for 5 o'clock because his thefts had been discovered. He was frightened and delayed. He returned later, around 9, slipping in by the service passage, and out again when panic overcame greed. Mrs. Pritchard saw him, but by then Ezra Vane was already dead." Belle swung to Reed. "You admitted this." Reed looked as if admission had become the only chair left to sit in. "I went there. I saw the study open. I touched the drawer. I left." Belle half rose, but Wolf's voice stopped him again. "Sit down, Inspector. Mr. Reed's entrance at 9 explains one confusion and one stupidity, both his own. It does not explain the murder. For that you must return to Miss Vane." Clara stood up. "This is monstrous." "No," Wolf said. "Merely accurate." She remained standing, black and rigid against the pale wallpaper, looking as if indignation itself had put on mourning. "You have no proof." Wolf's eyes rested on her as calmly as if she had asked whether rain was wet. "I have sequence, motive, and error. You and Reed had been meeting secretly. He had gambling debts. You had debts of your own and a lifetime's resentment at your brother's control. Ezra discovers the thefts. Reed panics. You see disaster coming from two directions: exposure of Reed's embezzlement, and with it the collapse of the small dishonesties by which you kept your own freedom from your brother's ledger. She said nothing that was wise. The danger of speaking to Wolf at that point is that he already has the sentence you are trying not to say. He continued. You arranged Martin Hale's errand. You put the key in his hand where others would remember it. You made sure that when death came, the police would have a ready path to follow. Meanwhile, you kept available the true route, an unlatched service door. For the man you expected to come, Gavin Reed, Bell said. Expected. Then Reed was meant to kill Vane? Number Wolf turned his head toward him impatiently. Expected to come. Yes, expected to plead, perhaps to steal back evidence, perhaps to accept terms. Miss Vane did not need certainty about his courage. She needed only his fear. Wolf looked back at Clara, and she needed the house arranged so that when Ezra died, Mr. Hale would already be standing in the frame. Martin Hale made another sound, this time less strangled and more stunned. Then, I was never. You were chosen, Wolf said. That is different. Clara's voice came low now, controlled by force. You cannot know what happened in that room. Wolf nodded once. On the contrary, I know enough. Ezra Vane entered the study in the late afternoon. The parcel was delivered. The stage was set. Reed failed to appear at 5. Ezra remained with the ledger and his discoveries. At some point before supper, someone within the house entered that study, carrying no need for a key because she lived there. Bell said sharply, She says the room was locked when she found the body. Yes, Wolf said, and later it was. But not continuously, and not by magic. Miss Vane had the spare key and knowledge of the service passage. She also had time, between 4:30, when Mr. Dora got no answer, and 6:30, when she announced the body, to do what was required: strike her brother, arrange the room, and restore the appearance of impossibility. Dor spoke for the first time. Smooth voice gone thin, but the locked room was a provincial trick, Wolf said contemptuously. The hall door could be locked after the fact by the spare key. The service route remained the real channel until later secured. What fooled everyone was not the room but the narrative attached to it. Bell was staring at Clara now as if he had never seen her before and disliked the novelty. Why keep the service door unlatched if she killed him herself? Wolf's lip moved. Because plans alter, she expected Reed. She prepared for Reed. But when Reed did not come and Ezra Vane remained alive with ruin in his ledger, she acted herself. The unlatched door remained as provision. Reed later used it, blundered in, touched the drawer, and fled. His fear complicated the scene without creating it. That was good. More than good. It drew the whole pattern tight enough to sing. Clara was still standing. The handkerchief in her hand had ceased to be cloth and become a white knot. You are inventing. No, Wolf said. I am opening the door you tried to hide. For the first time, the room felt not like a drawing room but like a dock before sentence. Reed looked sick, Martin looked young, Bell looked slow and furious. Mrs. Kipp looked vindicated down to the soles of her shoes. Wolf's voice remained level. You thought the borrowed key would carry the whole burden. It nearly did. A locked study, a publicly borrowed key, a poor young man with a quarrel and no alibi, sufficient, you believed, for the police and for Inspector Bell. Perhaps it would have been. Bell bristled. Wolf did not spare him a glance. But you forgot that stories and methods are not the same thing. The borrowed key was the story. The unlatched service door was the method, and the murder was only the point where the two met. The fire snapped softly. No one moved. I knew then that he had them, if not yet by the throat, then by the sleeve. One more turn, one more fact, and Clara Vane's careful mourning would split along the seam she had basted into it herself. Chapter 10. Faye. The weight of brass. Clara Vane tried silence first. It was not a bad choice. Silence, if properly worn, can look like dignity for a minute or two, especially in a drawing room with drawn curtains, a fire behaving itself, and several witnesses uncertain whether they are present for justice or bad manners. Clara stood by the chair she had left, one hand gripping the white knot of her handkerchief, the other hanging stiff against the black folds of her dress. Her face had gone pale in a controlled way, as if even the blood in her veins required permission to retreat. Wolf let the silence sit. He is better at that than anyone I know. Most men interrupt silence because they feel answerable for it. Wolf treats it as a servant who has entered with the next course and need only be allowed to do his work. Inspector Bell broke first, which was no surprise. "Miss Vane," he said, not quite yet ready to arrest respectability in black silk. "Mr. Wolf has made a serious accusation. You had better answer it." Clara turned her head and looked at him with chilled contempt. "I do not answer fantasies." "That," Wolf said, "is silence with jewelry on it." Her eyes came back to him. "You have no proof that I killed my brother." "No," Wolf said placidly, "only proof that you prepared Mr. Martin Hale to be blamed, concealed your knowledge of the service entry, lied about the drawer, lied about the ledger, and collaborated with a thief who had reason to fear exposure. The actual blow is almost a detail." Bell said, "Mr. Reed, you heard that, speak up." Reed's broad shoulders had been drooping for 10 minutes, and now seemed to settle another inch, as if the last bolt in him had loosened. He had gone beyond fear into the poorer country that follows it, where a man sees not danger but conclusion. "I went there to ask for time," he said. No one moved, even Bell let him continue. "At 5, Reed said, voice thick and low. "I was meant to go at 5. Ezra had sent word through Miss Vane that he wanted me in the study. I knew what for. He had found the pattern in the books." He swallowed. "I delayed, walked. Saturday in the office, pretending to look at invoices. Told myself perhaps he had not seen enough. Told myself lies until I ran out of them." Wolf said nothing. This was no longer his turn. It was confessions. "So I went later," Reed said. "Not at 5 near 6, the service door was unlatched." Bell jerked. "You told Wolf you went at 9, Reed nodded miserably. "I lied. At first to him, then to myself. It was before supper, not after. I heard no one in the passage. The house seemed still." His face had gone grey. "I entered the study. Ezra was alive. There it was at last, the point where all the threads stopped being theory and began to bind. Clara did not move. She might have been carved. Reed kept speaking, because once a frightened man has gone past the first drop, there is usually relief in the fall. He had the green ledger on the desk. He did not shout. That would have been easier. He only looked at me and said he had verified enough and would go to the police before morning." "Good," Wolf murmured. "Very good. That sounds like Ezra Vane." Reed licked his lips. "I begged him. I said I could repay. I said he would ruin me. He said that was no concern of his. Then Reed stopped." "Then Miss Vane entered," Wolf said. Reed's head came up fast. "Yes." Bell stared from one to the other. "She was there," Clara said sharply. Number Reed turned to her then, and whatever had kept him in her orbit. Fear, dependence, the habit of obeying stronger tempers, gave way. "Yes, you were there," he said. "You came in through the hall door. You must have heard us from outside. Ezra said if the police examined everything they might learn more than my theft. He said your name then." That landed. Clara's hand tightened once on the handkerchief. Wolf's voice stayed mild. "And what name would that be, Miss Vane?" "The name attached to the small household shortages, the private borrowings, the manipulations of bills and allowances. Your brother controlled your life by controlling the accounts. Exposure would not merely disgrace Mr. Reed. It would chain you to scandal." Clara's face changed, but not to guilt, not yet. To outrage. The second coin. "That is vile," she said. "You sit in my house and make up filth." "Bepfui," Wolf said. "I sit in your house because murder was committed here, and because you are clumsy at innocence." She turned to Belle. "Must I endure this?" Belle said, "You'll endure a good deal more if he's right." That surprised me enough that I nearly looked at Belle with respect. I restrained myself. Reed went on. Faster now, perhaps because if he stopped, he would have to hear himself. "Ezra told me to get out. He said he had tolerated my mistakes because he had thought me weak, not corrupt." Then he looked at Clara and said something like, "And you are no better with your meddling and your debts." Reed shut his eyes. "She told him not to speak to her that way," Wolf said quietly. And he laughed only once, a little. Reed's hands opened and shut on his knees. Then she took the bronze horse from the side table. Clara whispered, "Number." No one answered her. Reed's voice was almost gone now. I thought she meant to frighten him, or I thought nothing. I don't know. Ezra half rose. She struck him. He drew a breath that shivered. Only once, he fell sideways by the desk. Mrs. Kipp made a noise like a muffled sob, though whether for Ezra or for the wreck of the household I couldn't say. Martin Hale had gone utterly white. Louis Dora removed his spectacles and polished them with a hand not entirely steady. Belle was no longer red-faced. He had gone pale in his own way too, the way policemen do when a case they have loved for its simplicity turns, and bares teeth. Clara spoke then, and for the first time her control slipped enough to show the woman under it. He would have destroyed us both. Wolf nodded. "Yes, continue, Mr. Reed." Reed looked at Clara, as if seeing not a confederate, but the fact of her. For a second neither of us moved. Then she said, "Now it is done." That was exactly what she said. He rubbed one hand over his mouth. I said, "We must send for help." She said no, not yet. She said Martin Hale had already been in the room with the key, and that if we were not fools the blame would walk to him by itself. Martin shut his eyes. Wolf's gaze did not leave Reed, who locked the hall door. Clara, she had the spare key. She said the room must look untouched. He shook his head. I was sick. I could hardly think. She told me to go out by the back passage because the service door was unlatched for me and because no one would think of it later. She said she would discover the body at supper time. "Did you touch the ledger then?" "Number, the drawer." "Number, then when?" "Latter. After dark. I had gone home, then lost my nerve and came back. I thought if the ledger still named the entries, maybe I could take it or destroy the marked pages. That was when I went in again and heard someone coming and fled. That was when the charwoman saw me." Wolf leaned back. There the second intrusion. Panic after murder. Not murder itself. Belle exhaled through his nose. Hard. He turned to Clara. "Miss Vane, do you deny any of this?" She had reached the third coin now, tears. Not the ugly sort. Clara Vane would never give anybody the satisfaction of ugliness. They came neatly, with only a tremor in her mouth and a brightening of the eyes that would have looked touching if one had not just heard how efficiently she had tried to hang Martin Hale on a daylight errand. "My brother was a hard man," she said. "You did not live with him. You did not know what it was to have every expense questioned, every wish corrected, every hour accounted for as if I were a servant asking wages. Reed had stolen. Yes, I knew it. I knew because I knew what desperation looks like. Ezra knew too, and he was pleased by knowing, pleased." The tears moved now, and she did not wipe them away. He liked power. He held it over everyone. Belle said, "Did you strike him?" She did not answer at once. Wolf waited. So did we all. Then she said, "Yes." It came so quietly that for a second the rain at the window seemed louder. "Once," she said. "I only meant—" She stopped and gave a little laugh that had no mirth and very little sanity in it. "No, that is nonsense. I meant to stop him. I meant to stop everything." He said, my name with such contempt, as if I were one more item to be entered and balanced. So I struck him. Martin Hale opened his eyes and stared at her with the stunned helplessness of a man watching his own nightmare transfer ownership. Clara went on because now there was nothing left except accuracy. The rest was mine too. The parcel, the key. Martin was harmless. Yes, harmless enough to use. He had quarreled with Ezra. He was always carrying things, always appearing where anyone could remember him. I thought if the key was in his hand publicly, then once the room was found locked, no one would think beyond it. She looked at Martin, and for the first time there was something like shame there, though it had to fight its way through pride and exhaustion to show at all. I was right, for a while. A while, Wolf agreed. Bell stood up. That's enough. No, Wolf said. Not quite. He looked at Reed. You assisted afterward. You concealed. You returned later intending to tamper with evidence. Reed nodded. There was no fight in him now at all. Yes. And Miss Vane urged the plan from the beginning. Yes. Selected Mr. Hale as scapegoat. Yes. Arranged the borrowed key. Yes, Clara said with sudden bitterness. Why not have it all, Gavin? Give them every crumb. Reed flinched but did not answer her. Bell moved toward Clara. Miss Vane, I must ask you to come with me. She laughed again. Once, softly. At last the county wakes. Bell reddened, but this time he deserved it. And Reed, too. Reed rose without being told. Clara remained seated a moment longer, dabbing her eyes with the handkerchief that had begun the scene as a symbol of bereavement and ended it as a receipt. Then she stood, straightened the black skirt with both hands, and faced Wolf. You are a cruel man, she said. No, Wolf told her, only accurate. She looked as if she wanted to say more, perhaps something splendidly condemnatory, but the trouble with final speeches is that they require moral credit. She had none left. Bell took her arm, not roughly, and Reed followed them out, as if he had been doing so for years. When the front door had closed and the house had settled into the peculiar emptiness that follows the removal of scandal, no one spoke for several seconds. Then Martin Hale drew a breath that sounded painful. So that's all, he said. I shook my head. Number, that's the part where you stop being the county's favorite murderer. Dr. Vollard coughed and muttered something about statements. Louis Dora was already calculating legal arrangements with the reflexes of his trade. Mrs. Kipp stood by the mantel with both hands clasped, looking neither surprised nor vindicated, only tired. Respectable households do not enjoy learning how much labor their appearance has required. Wolf rose with effort and distaste. Since rising in strange drawing rooms is one of the indignities he endures, only when a case is ending. On the side table, Bell had left the spare brass key in the confusion. Wolf picked it up between thumb and forefinger and turned it once, slowly in the light from the fire. It was an ordinary object, bright at the worn places, dull elsewhere, innocent as metal always is, Martin said. Mr. Wolf. Wolf cut him off with a small movement. You may thank Archie, he had to travel. That was generosity from him on a level usually reserved for extinct saints. Outside it was nearly dawn by the time the formalities ended, statements taken, signatures hunted down, Bell's authority restored by paperwork, and the town allowed to begin digesting what it had almost done to Martin Hale out of appetite for neatness. Riddle Street was paling under a washed. Out sky curtains moved, faces appeared and vanished. Respectability, having been caught with blood under its nails, was already searching for soap and explanations. Martin came out of the house with me, pale, stunned, and free in the unsteady way. A man is free when the noose has only recently missed his neck. I don't know what to say, he told me. Try saying nothing until you've had coffee. He nodded, because that was within his strength and gratitude was not. We walked a few yards in the wet morning air. The town looked embarrassed. Good. When the hired car arrived to take us to the station, Wolf was already inside, installed with the weariness of a monarch returning from a campaign among inferior climates. I got in beside him. He still had the brass key in one hand. Well, I said. He glanced at it and then at me. Objects do not lie, Archie. Number, they merely wait around to be lied about. Precisely. He turned the key once more in his fingers. Only the hands that pass them around are false. The car started. Behind us, Riddle Street adjusted its curtains and practiced surprise. Ahead of us lay New York, beer at the proper hour, orchids at the proper hour, and Fritz, who I hoped had taken the enormity of justice into account when planning breakfast. As for the brass key, Wolf slipped it into my hand before he shut his eyes. "Return that to Bell," he said, "with my compliments, verbal compliments." Number that would be excessive. I put the key in my pocket and looked out at the wet road lifting toward morning. The case had begun with a borrowed object and a suspicion too neat for decency. It ended the way Nero Wolfe likes them to end, not with magic, not with guesswork, but with each small fact restored to its rightful owner until the truth had no place left to hide. And if Riddle Street learned anything from it, which I doubt, it might have been this: a borrowed key may open a door, but what ruins lives is the hand that decides whom the lock should accuse.